And so the best thing we can do, not just for the environment and the planet, but also for ourselves, is to rejoin the world. Today I'm staying home. Normally I take you on afternoon walks, but I'm quite busy today, so I've just taken a little coffee break out on the porch, and we're gonna have a chat as promised yesterday. Today I would like to talk to you about rewilding and why I think it is one of the most hopeful, let's call them initiatives or ideas I have come across in recent years. So when we're talking about rewilding, we're talking about, there's two aspects of rewilding that I want to talk about. And so the first one is the more obvious one, which is the rewilding of the land. So all over the world, you find a lot of people who have become quite disillusioned with politics and with how slow change comes about when it comes to saving biodiversity or saving the environment. And so these individuals have basically taken matters into their own hands. They have either organized or they're just literally doing this all by themselves. This smells so good. They're taking pieces of land privately that they then rewild, which means that they plant native vegetation, and they're working towards restoring land that was formerly used maybe for agriculture, or even land that hadn't belonged to anyone previously. And they're restoring that. And so what I love about rewilding, so there's different aspects. For example, there's whole big organizations that are doing rewilding that you can donate to. I lived in the Daintree in Far North Queensland in Australia for a while, and there was a group of people, just individual people who had organized, and they were taking donations from locals in the area to buy swaths of land all over the Daintree rainforest, which is the oldest rainforest in the world. It still stems from the times of Gondwana land. So that is pristine, biodiverse habitat that these people have decided they're going to save. So they take donations and they buy back that land and rewild it and just not even do much with it. Sometimes they just leave it. They just want to make sure that it is preserved for the future. So they're trying to preserve as much of the Daintree rainforest as possible. Another example is an organization called African Parks, the African Parks Network. They're also donation based, and they are basically all over the African continent. They are making deals with African governments where they take over the national parks in those countries, and they are trying to restore them, and they're trying to restore what's called the Big Five into those parks. So that's lions, elephants, buffalo, leopard, and rhino. And the thinking behind that is that these 5 species serve like an umbrella species for the rest of all the other animals, but also the plants, etc., that are in that park. And those are the animals that tourists most likely would want to see. And so they are restoring these parks and making them fit for ecotourism. Actually, to keep an eye here on this temperature. Almost there. So yeah, there's a difference when it comes to rewilding. There's either conservation or there's preservation. So preservation basically means we are preserving the land, we're building a fence around it, and we're just going to leave it alone, and humans are basically not allowed in there, which is, fine. But it will then most likely always depend on some kind of donation. You have to somehow keep up with running this place. There's still there's a whole different topic about what constitutes as wilderness today. I think this is done. So there's always going to be some form of human involvement, or like you even need to pay for like the upkeep of the fences. Okay, I'm just going to heat this up a little bit. But there's also conservation, and conservation doesn't take the human out of the equation. I'm personally more of a fan of conservation because I strongly believe that as humans, we are nature. We are a part of nature, and we should be a part of whatever ecosystem we're around. So I think it's important to involve humans. And yes, that does mean impact to a certain extent. Like if we're talking about ecotourism, that does mean that there's probably going to be safari vehicles, for example, that are driving around. But the employment this creates in the local community, and also the values that these tourists are able to take back home, what they're learning about nature, what they're learning about different cultures, what they're learning from the local guides, etc., etc., in my opinion, is worth it. And I do think it's important that we stop with this separation between humans and nature. I think that is what got us into this whole mess. I just need to pull this out. Bit of a mess. I'm preheating this coffee maker. I'm also wetting the filter. I just find it works better. Anyway, don't mind me. Okay, so that is the rewilding of the land. And what's so great about it, and why it gives me so much hope, is that it is very accessible for everyone. Yes, there are these huge organizations that take donations, and they're very organized, but rewilding is accessible to everyone. I don't think that's quite enough yet. You can donate, but you can also just start in your own garden, in your own community. You can start on your own balcony. It smells so good. I wish you could smell it. So the idea is to create these little pockets of rewilded land, however small they may be. So you're basically creating these corridors for animals, for insects, and so forth. And that's why it's actually so great. Farmland which only has monocrops sometimes isn't the best idea for biodiversity and for, you know, local animals to thrive. It's much better sometimes to have these human gardens where there's a variety of different plants, you know. And that is something that we can all do. We can all create these very, very small ecosystems wherever we live. And that is, I think, very achievable, and it's very empowering. Another example here from Western Australia, where I live. So here in Western Australia, we have the black cockatoos. There's different species of them, and they are all critically endangered at this point because of human encroachment, because of a lot of logging, because of bushfires as well. And so there has been a lot that has been lost already, and people here are getting quite frustrated that not enough is happening to help these cockatoos survive. And basically, if we don't do something about it, all these cockatoo species could be gone within a matter of as little as 20 years. So, but what people are doing is they have discovered what food these cockatoos, these large birds, like. And for example, they love macadamias, they also love apples, they love all kinds of fruit trees. So people have literally taken matters into their own hands, and they are starting to grow these kinds of fruit trees themselves to create these pockets. It's also very important that these animals, in the heat of the summer, it's very hot here and very dry in Australia, that these birds have enough water. So to put out water for them so they can just stop over somewhere on the way to these large carry trees that they need for nesting. they can just stop over somewhere along the way and, you know, rest and feed and drink and then continue on their journey. So that is something we can do, and there are countless examples of that. So it's very accessible, and this now ties into the second aspect of rewilding. So there's not just the rewilding of the land, but there's also the rewilding of the self, the rewilding of the soul. And what that entails is kind of what I touched on earlier already, that we are part of nature. And a lot of the reason why we got into this mess, this environmental crisis, is because we have separated ourselves from the rest of the world with our rubber soles, or, you know, our shoes, with our four walls. And so the best thing we can do, not just for the environment and the planet, but also for ourselves, is to rejoin the world. And the fantastic thing about that is that this is completely free. You know, you don't have to join an expensive yoga class. You don't need any equipment to do this. It is literally just a matter of stepping outside, taking your shoes off, walking around barefoot on the ground to reconnect with this earth. It's a matter of sitting in a park, leaning against a tree, and also to return to the same spots and to really foster that relationship with the other beings on this planet. So you keep coming back to the same spots, and you also notice the changes that happen throughout the season. And when you do that, you become an active part of nature again. And not only is that good for your health, but also you become, what I spoke about yesterday, you become ecologically literate again, where you start to understand how everything else is connected and how things change throughout the season and in different weather. And I do think there is such a disconnect that has happened. I think we all know that there's such a disconnect that has happened, where we now spend, on average, as a collective, in the Western world, we spend 90% of our time indoors on average. So that's pretty bad. And so as soon as we rejoin the world, this is also so good for our own mental health and for our physical health. And I just think that, you know, rewilding is, it's almost gotten to a point where it's a little bit woo-woo almost, you know, but there's nothing woo about it. And it also has very little to do with this buzzword mindfulness that's going around. And I used to be a very big fan of the word mindfulness, but I have come to like a different word more, and that is bodyfulness. So I was never good at meditating. Really, I always struggled to just sit still, and I never enjoyed the focus on, you know, up here on my mind. And so bodyfulness is the opposite. It's kind of similar, but it makes a very important distinction, and that is that we don't just stay up here in our minds, in our logical thinking minds, but we actually get in touch with our body, and our body in turn is always in touch with this earth, with everything that is around us. And so how do we practice bodyfulness? Well, there's whatever calls you. It can be gardening, it can be running, it can be, you know, earthing, walking barefoot on a beach, it can be dancing, it can be baking sourdough, it can be cooking, it can be anything and everything that moves your body and that connects you with this body, with this vessel that you've been given to walk around in. And again, this might seem like such a small thing, but imagine if we all did that. Imagine if we all, or at least the majority of people, you know, the people who feel sort of called to do something about this, imagine more of us felt this connection again to these guys out there. You know, I think there's so much that we can do. And what I do when I want to reconnect is I have kind of embraced my crazy rewilding self at this point. So what I like to do is I actually talk to the kangaroos that hop past, or I talk to the trees, I talk to the river, because I do think there's a lot of power that comes from saying things out loud. And so if you need some inspiration, what I do is, for example, when I want to talk to the river, I'll go out to the river, which is not far from where I live, and I walk down there and I sit down by the riverbank, and I always bring a little gift. I always bring something. So I like to collect feathers, and they are very, very dear to me. So oftentimes I will bring a feather that I will offer up to the water, and I'll put it in the water with some well wishes, and then I go into conversation. It has become my new form of journaling. I don't even use the written words anymore for that. I don't even write things down anymore. I just say them out loud. I say what's on my mind. I say what's bothering me, but I also always try to give something back in return, something that I would like to offer, something that I would like, that what I'm hoping for, something that I hope in my lifetime to make better. And I really find that nothing else has connected me this much to nature. And it is it's a bit of an embarrassing thing to admit that I do this, but I don't know, I think at this point we need to just embrace our weirdness. Rewilding is one of the most empowering things we can do, because it's basically saying, I'm not waiting for whatever government is in charge right now to hope for change to happen. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go voting. You absolutely should go voting and advocate for political change. But rewilding is another measure on top of that. So it's in most cases completely free. It's very good for your health, and it's very good for the health of the environment as well. And it also makes you realize how little you need and how much is actually out there. And you'll be surprised how much it will enrich your life when you actually cross that barrier of speaking out loud and actually going into communication with nature. You know, this is something that the women in my family have always done. My great-grandmother had a garden, and she would always talk to her plants, and my mother taught me to do the same thing. I had this little garden patch growing up where I would tend to the plants, and it's something that just comes natural to the women in my family, I would say. So I would highly encourage you to do the same. And for now, I'm going to finish my coffee, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Make sure to subscribe if you find the series interesting, and I would also love to know what you do to rewild yourself. And then I'll see you back here tomorrow. I think a lot of us are just tired of this endless consumption, and I'm just really questioning if there's a different way of doing things.